Yes, thanks very much. Firstly, thanks very much for the invitation. I'm always honored to really speak to anybody about any topic. This is clearly one very close to my heart. Just to finish up from yesterday on the Kruger Millions. You know, when you let's go Google ChatGPT. You ask it how many coins fall out of circulation by getting lost in South Africa. 30 to 50% of coins just get lost by people. So when we talk about the Kruger Millions, imagine, as I did, the train sat in Machadodorp for 13 days, unloading gold and coins. And by the way, there were 3 gold coins found at one place that was mentioned yesterday. Just 3 of the 30 to 50% of the coins that dropped out of the pockets and the saddlebags and everything. So when we say the Kruger Millions are out there, don't necessarily mean buried in a big hole, but they are out there. Believe you me, that they are out there, and people do find them. I know one site, 13 felt pounds on one spot were found. So they kind of do get found. So the myth is alive, it's still living in my heart. The other thing that was quite interesting as well, I think, if we're looking at heritage and tourism, and I cover this in my presentation a little bit later. Interesting story, isn't it? Start in Pretoria and have a tour through Pretoria, and that's kind of gold Kruger Millions tour out through Machadodorp, out through Waterfall on the great tourist story of that. Whether the gold exists or not, who cares if it's a great story and you have a beer and a good meal at the end of it. Okay, so we're here to talk about blockhouses. I'm going to cover a little bit about me. I'm kind of a bit of a different historian. I do history a little bit different. You know, my life story is different. I come from a technology background. My books, as the title says, got an engineer's perspective on. So I like doing numbers and figures and facts and hard stuff, hard data where I can find it to analyze situations and history stuff. Because a lot of it is subjective, not objective, and there's a lot of passion involved, clearly, in war stories and what happened and everything like that. So you'll see that kind of come through in my life story. I'll tell you the blockhouse story in outline, but we're going to focus on the little blockhouses, the small ones, the wriggly tin ones, ones made out of corrugated iron, because those were made by Major Rice, Major Spring Rice, who was an engineering officer who started it in Middelburg. And that's why I'm here today, because Middelburg is the birthplace of the Rice Pattern Blockhouse, which the local history society weren't particularly aware of. And that's why I'm here to kind of promote and educate, and maybe we can make an amendment to the blue plaque on Cannon Cop Hill that says that is one of the first places where rice pattern blockhouses were erected. Not the actual spot, because I'll show you that later. Okay, what's my background? As you've heard, I'm a military guy, 30 years. What brought me to South Africa? A woman. It's a good enough reason. But now I'm here. What other good reasons are there to be here? The weather. Even in wintertime on the Highveld, it is stunning. And of course, the other great things that South Africa has, the people, the alcohol, and the food. All those are great recipes that you need to add into heritage and tourism. We kind of did that last night at the gala dinner. But when we look at converting, if you like, the worth of heritage has to be paired and twinned like a good steak or a good pinotage, has to be paired together with tourism. Because heritage means nothing without jobs and tourism. And I'll try and illustrate that as we go through the presentation. I work for Kinetic, a defense consultant, so a lot of my background is in research, innovation, research and technology. So I like to innovate, and innovate to me is often shaking the tree of whatever it is that I'm involved in. So I'm a bit of class myself as an innovative disruptor in terms of what I do. So shaking the tree and challenging accepted ideas was fundamental in starting me on my blockhouse journey, because I was reading books and it all told the same story, and it was all very thin, all a bit bland, and some of it didn't look right. Didn't feel right. There was a deeper story. So I'm a bit of an investigator. I like to go kind of deep on stuff. Then worked for Denel, building aeroplanes on Atlas Road, and then worked for G4S security company. Everybody say boo. Okay. Yeah, you all know about G4S. At the time, I was retrenched by G4S because they screwed up the contract for the London security for the Olympics, and I was retrenched. Started me on my journey then deeper and deeper into sitting at a computer 12 hours a day, 4 or 5 days a week researching blockhouses. And that's kind of where I started before I did my primary research and went into the archives of, pretty much everywhere here and in the UK as well. Became a body stress release practitioner. That's my day job. That kind of pays for the passion of buying books and doing other stuff and coming to conventions and doing the stuff I love. And by the time, by the time COVID came, my wife was saying, you either finish this book or we're done, you and me. You need to get this done. Having dragged the family, the mother-in-law, sons, everybody else to nearly every blockhouse in South Africa, said it's time you finished it off. So for me, COVID was a blessing. 2.5 months where I found a publisher and became a self-publisher, and that really got me on my journey. So that's me. What is a blockhouse? Well, those are two blockhouses. Basically, a blockhouse is a defensive structure. If you were talking Motte and Bailey or Castle Keeps, this is the primary defensive stronghold to defend a certain point. And as you can see, there are loopholes in it, holes and apertures in the walls, splayed at an angle so you can fire from it. If you go to the Tower of London, you will find a number of loopholes for archers and for cannon. So these have their roots in archery and cannon artillery and stuff like that. These made for small arms. The lower one in colours, the Witkop blockhouse in Meyerton. We're busy trying to save that 12-year running battle with Sahara. We're firing a lot of shots and not getting very much in return, unfortunately. Though everybody agrees that something should be done. Everyone's agreeing every time we meet, but nothing is actually getting done. But that's another story. So these are two blockhouses, and the one you see in black and white there is a rice pattern blockhouse. And how did this come about? Well, I'm going to explain the story. But one blockhouse can be put on a particular spot, such as a key point, a bridge, a railway station, a single point to defend it. But if you want to defend linear things, such as railways, or protect a river, or protect a line of communication, you need to add them together. And basically what you do then is join them together with barbed wire, put a trench in between. Notice the trench is offset at an angle, because when you want to fire along the wire, the last thing you want to do is hit your mate in the next blockhouse, who's not far away and definitely within rifle range. So you offset these at an angle so you can fire along at will along the line and not hit your friendly Tommy Atkins on the next blockhouse. Usually put about 1 mile apart, often had a ditch in between, and a lot of the ditches actually still survive. So you can find the ditches on the veldt, the zigzaggy ditches, and if you know what you're looking for. This then becomes a system. So this appeals to me. I'm a systems engineer. I love systems. You end up with a blockhouse system. You end up with a lot of blockhouses with a protection system. They've got trenches around. They've got a spider web of barbed wire around to protect them. They've got a communication system. A lot of them are on telegraph lines. A lot of them are on railway lines. Some connected by heliograph. As a supply system sitting, in the end, it was 40,000 soldiers all across South Africa on the veldt needing water and rations every day became a logistic issue. A lot of them were connected, certainly in the Machalis, with mule tracks, which leave a legacy behind, which leave a heritage footprint. There's the human aspect to it. 40,000 men sat, normally bored as heck, waiting for the Boers to come and cross the line, and waiting for De Wit again to come and jump the line, as he did quite often, was boring. And you end up with a lot of what we call gentrification. of a blockhouse. They would build regimental pictures out of stones, keep goats, have little market gardens, do all sorts of things to stop themselves getting bored. Um, they would have an alarm system on them, from the basic kind of tins on the wire to chemical type alarms and rockets and flares and stuff like that. So it became a whole kind of system. And what I'm going to show you is how that was deployed during the phases of the war. I'm not sure what Francois covered in his talk on the first day, but I'll just give you a kind of potted history of the war in terms of how it ebbed and flowed from it started on day one and how the blockhouses were integrated into that. Bearing in mind day one, H-hour, day one, there was no concept of building blockhouses. Nobody even thought the war was going to last for 2 and a bit years. So there's no concept of building blockhouses. So why were they built? Well, phase one really was defense of the key lines of communication in the Cape. So you see here the blockhouse at Beaufort West, and these larger blockhouses built and designed by Major General Elliot Wood, who'd been in Egypt previously, built a similar design to what he'd been using previously. There's about 18 of these built. I think about 12 or 14 from memory still survive, but are in sad decay. So, and they were built for major rail bridges, so key point defense of rail bridges. This one at Beaufort West had one on. Where the bridge got overextended, they would build one on either end. So you end up with pairs of them on much larger bridges. No one of these blockhouses was ever attacked. They were just too strong, too defensive. Even when the commandos came into the Cape Colony in the later parts of the war, they had no artillery. So the Boers had no artillery by that stage. So they could only be attacked with small arms fire, and unless you can catch a defensive structure like this off guard, not really worth attacking. And there's lots of stories of them detouring around these. Even Smuts later said for the Janssenville blockhouse, we were going to drop in for coffee, but it looked too strong, so we did a detour. So after Pretoria was taken, this is kind of when the Rice story starts. After Pretoria was taken, there was a need to defend the railway line out to Lorenzo Marques, and we heard about that railway line. People have written dissertations on the railway line, but this is where Jack Hindon and the rail attackers started to attack the railway line and had a significant impact on disrupting the movement of troops, and it was expensive. It was costing a lot of money to repair. So they needed some sort of defensive tool to be able to do that. Rather than patrolling up and down all the time, they needed to put defensive structures. Previously, all the stations had been done with open sandbag works and everything like that. And I'm going to explain the story a little bit deeper. But there was a need then to have something that was quicker and cheaper to deploy and put troops in to defend this railway line. And I'll show you that later on, how effective it was. So we get now into the decision made, for me, worst decision ever made. If there was ever a time to pinch the war in the bud, so to speak, and end it, it was that decision for the war to continue and the guerrilla war. My personal view is the Boers should have sued for peace. You'd have got a great peace. We wouldn't be in a lot of the mess we're in today if there had been peace, but hey, the decision was made. You had two intransigent groups of people. One was the British Empire and one was the Boer will to continue. It carried on. So we ended up with a guerrilla war phase where now all the railway lines became vulnerable. So we now had to defend all the railway lines, and this is where the idea of blockhouses went into the mass production phase. For me, that's another interesting aspect to it. As a systems engineer and coming out of aircraft manufacturing, we're now into a kind of mass production phase with some rapid application development, rapid product development going on to quickly get a solution on the ground. And it was quick. And then the final phase, really, in the guerrilla phase, was the vulnerability of the Cape colonies then to people like Smuts. And Smuts Commando really was what got me started on the Anglo-Boer War. I read an article in the Getaway magazine where it showed the route of Smuts Commando and all the places along the route. And Lanesburg Blockhouse was in there. And I saw the article on Lanesburg Blockhouse, and that just triggered something that got me deeply researching the topic. Now we're into the phase of actually building forts for all the town guards that were deployed. Don't know where that's coming from. Okay. All the town guards and 125 town guards. If each town guard had 4 blockhouses, that's another a few hundred blockhouses or blockhouses and forts to add into the mix. That one there is the one at Richmond, veg copy. And that's the only one. When I went down to the book fair and visited, walk around the town and walk around the copies, and you can find 3 or 4 more of them. That's why I revised the figure. So when I looked at how many blockhouses were built, it was classed as 8,000. When you go to the engineer list and put the engineer list into a spreadsheet and double check the maths on it, they actually got the maths wrong. So everyone's been reporting glibly on how many blockhouses were built to the absolute number, when actually some engineering officer didn't do his maths right and got the number wrong. So always worth checking facts and details. Did a very interesting look at De Wet crossing particular parts of the railway, part of a blockhouse line. And he said he crossed it at a certain geographical point, and then it said he recrossed it at a farm somewhere different. When you actually look at the farm name and look at the geographical place, it's the same place. He didn't cross it at different points at all. He crossed it the same place. He went through one way, went where he had to go, realized he had to go back and cross somewhere else, and decided to go back the place he'd just come from. Interesting. So you must double check these things and facts and all the things that we gladly take from history, because back in the day, they don't have some of the tools that we have today. And there's a great debate about rewriting history and all that sort of stuff. But it's often worth a second look with a critical eye. And that's what I did with blockhouses. So just showing you kind of the deployment of blockhouses and giving you a feel for the scale that was involved. This is the phase 1 that I showed you. The little kind of explosion things are the key points where you would have had blockhouses and the rail infrastructure. Notice it goes from Cape Town, Port Alfred, East London, Durban, Lorenzo Marques, and up to Petersburg, and as far west as Ruston, that would be Klerksdorp, and then it goes all the way up into what's all the way up the west side as well. Then we had the period of the trial that went on. Bear in mind that the whole blockhouse story started with, cheers, thanks. Okay, started with the trial out here based on Middelburg. I'll tell you that story in a minute, but that was the trial phase. And the trial phase to do that only lasted 3 months before they started mass production. So it was done very quickly, very rapidly, and very effectively as well. We then get into fortifying the entire rail network, about 6,000 kilometers worth of rail network. If you can imagine hopping on a train in the station in Cape Town, getting on the train, slow steam train, but imagine it's a fast one today, and you're going to Petersburg, now it's Polokwane in the north, and you're going to pass a blockhouse at least every kilometer on the journey. At least every kilometer on the journey, and that's just one line. Similarly, the Port Alfred East London lines, the Durban lines are also blockhoused. I haven't quite established whether they're blockhoused all the way down. They kind of stop here, some of Queenstown and Newcastle. I'm not sure about these ones here, whether they were entirely blockhoused all the way down, because they're nominally in safer areas of the battlefield and everything like that. Then we get into building the cross-country lines. Lines were built across country and to protect the Cape Colony. Why were they built across country? Well, the rail network, if you imagine the rail network is a skeleton, that skeleton has a number of tentacles that kind of come out, and the cross-country lines were built to divide the vast areas of South Africa and the Boer republics into smaller parcels and packets of land to form a network of blockhouses. Why was that done? Well, the strategy that was developed, what we call nascent strategy or strategy on the fly, was to try now to capture the Boer commandos. Clearly in a guerrilla phase, and I'll show you the kind of strategy as how I see it that was developed by Kitchener post Roberts leaving. Roberts thought when he left it was kind of war was all over, left Kitchener to do the mopping up in the guerrilla phase, and he really got the dodgy end of the wicket, shall we say, in terms of the guerrilla phase, and I'll explain that to you. So why a network? Well, the officer class of the time was really came from the estates of the counties of England, and when you're on an estate in the UK and in England, when you want to go shooting pheasant, shooting grouse, you stand in what are called butts, small stone sangers, and all the staff from the estate go out, far out into the estate and beat the grouse. So they beat the grouse through the bush and push all the birds onto the butts for the landed gentry there. And he's got somebody to load his birdie shotguns for him as well. Those are the days, eh? When you had a man to be able to do that for you and carry your whiskey in your flask as well, no doubt. Didn't happen in my day, I have to say, but I did go on one shoot. So they stand there and shoot, and this was exactly the principle that was used to try and capture the Boer commandos. So how did they do that? The butts were the blockhouses. The staff who went to the veldt were the drives, or the driving columns, and the driving columns literally were hunting the commandos on the hoof, often shoulder to shoulder, man to man for 100 kilometers, and driving across the veldt to try and push the Boers onto the blockhouse lines where the blockhouses are waiting. A couple of armored trains. Bear in mind there were 20 armored trains that were used during the Boer War as well, with artillery and pom-poms and heavier ordnance on to try and do that. So it was a principle developed on the estates for hunting grouse that were now being used to hunt down, if you like, the Boer commandos. That was a tactic that was used. So in terms of the strategy that was developed, and I call it a nascent strategy on the fly. Something happens, you need to counter it. There was no concept of a guerrilla phase when the war started. It was going to be a conventional phase. Maybe we didn't know how it was going to go. Capture Pretoria, capture Johannesburg, the war was supposed to be over. It wasn't. And this is what happens in warfare. And if you want to look at this and say, this is grotesque and it's bad, I agree with you. Guess what? It's happened previously in history, and guess what's happening in Gaza and with Hamas and with Israel today? Same thing, ladies and gents. This is how war is fought. And the people who get in the middle, not the politicians generally, sat in whichever capital city they are, or it's the people on the ground, the civilians and the men that fight that. So there was a strategy of scorched earth and concentration camps. That's removing the infrastructure from which the Boers could fight from. We all know that story. And then the denial of movement had three components to it. The blockhouse system, as I've described it, the drives, which were the roving columns, and then the armored trains were involved in that as well. And how effective was it? Well, in my engineering perspective, this is kind of how it played out. Here we see the amount of Boers captured over 17 months, 29,000. Blockhouses built from the 180 it started with to over 9,000. And how many drives conducted, 69 drives. This is a logarithmic scale, by the way. So over a period of time, you can demonstrate, and I'm going to go deeper in this with the next level of study that I'm doing, how really the combat effectiveness, the bitter end of strategy, pushed the Boers push the Boer commandos into a place where they were no longer effective as a fighting force, and that's kind of how it played out. So let's get on to the man who really did that, Major Spring Rice. He was an Irishman. Some of the dates uncannily similar to mine. I was born in 1958. He was born in 1858. Um, and he became a major in 1896. I became a major in 1996. He was age 38 when he came to South Africa. Um, so getting on a little bit, but that also meant he had experience. He'd come from the engineering school in Chatham. He was sent in July 1999, commanding 23 Field Company. And that's the unit he pretty much commanded. So he did a lot of staff work as well. So as a major, you could leave your company to do its work. He came out there with a second in command called George Falk, whose career matched his quite interestingly. The two came across each other in later life. He was posted into Natal, started fighting on the Natal front, and was involved in the Battle of Lombard's Cop and Nicholson's Neck, known as Morphamunda. And you'll all be glad to hear that's when British were getting a bit of a pasting in the early parts of the war, in the battles in Black Week and the Colenso and Spion Kop and those sort of battles that happened a little bit later as well. He then, the British retreated. The British were allowed to retreat by the Boers into Ladysmith, and so began the three sieges, where really it was also considered from the Boer forces that sieging the British in towns might well bring an end to the war as well. It previously had some level of success. But holed up in Ladysmith for 118 days was Springrise and his company. Bear in mind this time as well, it was a time when Wagon Hill was attacked in Ladysmith. Digby Jones was killed, Lieutenant Digby Jones, who was later to receive the Victoria Cross. So the field company, and bear in mind engineers are teeth arms, classed with the infantry, cavalry, and artillery as teeth arms, were getting battle hardened. They were getting tempered in battle. They were getting shelled every day by the Boers. That can't be much fun. And they were getting experience in learning how to defeat and defend themselves against incoming small arms fire and incoming artillery as well. So the daily effort when you're in defense and getting pounded every day is to repair the defenses and make them better. And he was mentioned in dispatches for the first time. It's come out a little bit blurry, that one. Do you have a better picture? Don't know why that's come out so blurry. But in the middle, oopsie, this one, is Major Springrise. There he is. I've since got a much better copy of this picture. 120 odd men. That's when they were based in Middelburg. These are some of the men of the company. I had the privilege the other day, somebody phoned me up and said, "Oh, I had a relative that was in 23 company. I've got his medal. Would you like to meet me and hear the story and see his pictures?" Oh, and I think there's some blockhouses in there as well. To which I said, "Cool, yeah, I'd love to do that." So I went to meet the great-great-great-granddaughter of this guy, Sapper Pocock, who was in this picture somewhere. I haven't quite located him yet. And she had all his pictures and his medal, which is quite cool. And the original picture of this particular blockhouse, which you'll see back there, which was on Cannon Cop. I went to visit that yesterday. So that's a better picture. There's actually a regiment, the company signboard at the back there. I'm quite sure worked out if that's Springrise in the middle. But she let me take pictures of all the stuff and everything like that. So it's kind of tying people back to, back into history, where stuff was, how they fought, and everything like that, which also kind of rocks my boat as well. So that is the Cannon Cop blockhouse and searchlight. Why did they put it so far out of town? Well, go visit and stand on the spot. You can see for miles, and that light was pretty bright. These two, we're going to come on to that. Yeah, let me go on to that. We'll come back to that in a minute. So how did the blockhouses get developed? Originally, and this tells us the story in Blockhouse. That's Barberton Blockhouse, the one in Pretoria, and the one in Bloemfontein, in the museum in Bloemfontein. They started as kind of rectangular boxes. They had an exoskeleton of wood, these black blobs on the outside, and a kind of endoskeleton on the inside to support it, and some wriggly tin. So this idea of having a sandwich of wriggly tin, it wasn't actually Rice's idea. It was his second in command. Second in command was George Fouke. He had this idea. It came about because the Boers used to go to the telegraph lines, cut the telegraph lines, sit themselves a few hundred meters away and wait for a party of engineers to come out, and then shoot them. Cracking idea. You go and cut a line, form an ambush, and the engineers are getting pretty fed up with that. So they were working on how to put some screens up and mobile screens to protect themselves doing that. So George Fouke came up with this idea of having this sandwich of wriggly tin and putting some stones in between, for which Major Rice, I think, developed the idea. And of course, he was the senior officer, so he was the one who was going to get all the credit for it. It could have been the Fouke blockhouse, I guess, at some point, but that didn't quite happen. So it worked. This blockhouse is still there, 120 odd years later, so that's pretty testament to everything. Bit vulnerable at the corners. The wood's going to rot over time. Quite thick, quite labor intensive. It was a bit slow, and there was about 8 of these originally built at kind of key points. Then they came up with the idea. Sorry? Yes, indeed. The next design was a hexagonal one, so the walls got thinner. They came in kind of prefab pieces to put around the outside, but again, vulnerable at the corners and still a bit timely to erect and put up. This is the one at Pretoria on its original place, how it used to look. I'll explain that story a little bit later too. The final iteration happened kind of by chance, I guess, and by just absorbing what you can see in your environment. And this is kind of where the innovation comes in. Rice received a rolling machine to make water tanks. The idea is you take one piece of wriggly tin and you put it through that machine a lot of times, and it closes up and makes a circle, and then you just join it together and it makes a water tank. The thought is, having seen all the rondavels in South Africa and receiving this machine, he had the brainwave that said, hey, we can make these things round. All we need is like 8 sheets, and we put the right curve in it. We can put sheets together and join them. And then that idea of having a sandwich and putting stones in, well, we can make an outer one and an inner one. Let's do that. And that was the birth. That was the spark, if you like, that allowed the Rice pattern blockhouse to be developed. And that's what they started to do, right here in Middelburg. I'd love to find where the factory was. I'm guessing it's somewhere near the railway line. But then they started mass production, and that whole time frame was 3 months. 3 months. So when we talk about RPD's rapid protocol development, it's like what Dyson did with his vacuum cleaner. The Dyson vacuum cleaner was built over about 8 months, and he used to just prototype. Everything he knew everything he did, every time he built a prototype wasn't quite right, but he kept building and building quickly until, guess what, it came right. And that's a good approach to life. You never get 100% fit first go, second go, third go, but maybe after 5 or 6 iterations, and you do it quick enough and get feedback quick enough, which is what he did, then you can get to a stage where you can build stuff, and then you're in IKEA territory. You're all flat-packed IKEA stuff, comes in a box, set of instructions, you bolt it together. Most men go, yeah, instructions, don't need those. And we start building without the instructions. Yeah, bad idea. Somebody's put those instructions together for a reason. This didn't quite work first time. What he had to do was send some models. So they made some models and sent those out to all the different engineer units. And there are about seven different engineer units. So where were the first 2 based? Well, this is the old Jackson map. I've had to cobble together a couple of maps there. First 2 were built over the Klein Olifants River on the 31st of January 1901. And how do I know that? Well, it came out the primary source of the engineer diary written by Major Rice. So that's where the first 2 Rice pattern blockhouse were officially put on that little bit of river. Not actually been there yet, so it's going to be worth a nice field trip to have a look at that. It would have been something like that. This is one of the early crude ones. bear in mind, you give somebody a design in the early stages, you end up with a lot of variations very quickly. This variation, the one with the kind of pitch roof, was again iterated once it got in the field, especially once it got in the wide open spaces of the Karoo and places like that, where it's windy. These roofs started to blow off. You needed to tie them down. So we ended up with a low profile umbrella roof you'll see on a lot of blockhouses. Again, that was easy to erect, less wood. Wood was scarce. You put wood in a blockhouse, the guys chop it up and burn it and use it for fuel, unfortunately. There ain't much wood about, so you need to be able to do that. This is the blockhouse on top of Cannon Cop being erected. That picture is off the website, and that's the original I had out of the ladies' collection. The two blockhouses you see either side are probably where the dynamos sit for these two honking great searchlights. I mean, you know, Jack Hinden was not a fan of these. When they got you in a beam, they really got you in a beam. You know, it was pretty formidable, and he was ducking and diving around that, trying to go and blow up the railway line. So quite effective. You know, blockhouse is a blockhouse and searchlights, armored trains. They're overt. They're not camouflaged. You don't hide them. You stick them there and say, keep away, go somewhere else. Bit of a principle we use in South Africa for our sort of protection. We put up high fences, we put up wire, we put up cameras. Chances are, most times, if people want to come and rob you, they're going to do it, unless you've got all that stuff. And all they do is go somewhere else. And that's kind of the principle that was being used with the blockhouses too. That's how it looks today. Pile of stones. As my American Army officer colleague said of Stonehenge, gee man, it's just a pile of rocks. And ain't that just heritage? You know, somebody's pile of rocks is somebody else's, you know, rocks their boat. And for me, finding where blockhouses were and stuff like that, finding those little piles of rocks, rocks my boat. Not quite Stonehenge, but there you go. So these are two photographs of the factory in Middelburg. So here we see the factory in operation, literally kind of Model T Ford, Henry Ford kind of idea. One man does one thing. He rolls all the wriggly tin, passes it on to the next guy. He puts the holes in it, and somebody else is making the timbers. And guess what? If you find one of these blockhouses that were built in a factory, they're all numbered. You go to the joints, and there's a joint with two. There's a number on one and a number on the other, and they match up. So these are all pretty professionally made quite quickly in a factory, in serial production. And then they were assembled, disassembled, packed on an ox wagon, and sent away. And a good factory, most factories are making 2 a day. And there were 7 factories, and there's 7 days in a week. So you can, you know, you do the maths on that pretty quickly. You got a very effective way to do it. And there's a quote. So that's where it started. Other factories, Bloemfontein, Standerton, Pretoria, you know, all those. They're also built at the ports as well. The vast majority of the zinc and the CGI corrugated iron was coming from the UK, coming from Wolverhampton. A lot of it is stamped. There are train spotters out there who collect the stamps that go into the zinc and everything like that. Quite interesting, because you can tie that piece of zinc back to a town in the UK if you know what you're doing, if you can find enough of them. So what happened to Spring Rice after the war? Well, he still had a pretty illustrious career. Went back to the UK, 1902. Oh, isn't that just the year I came 100 years later to South Africa, 2002? My goodness. He was mentioned in dispatches further 6 times, got married, and then when war broke out in... Is that my voice? Is it golf? Oh. So he joined up during, as most retired officers, he was probably on half pay at the time, joined up and went out to be colonel of the BEF, took over from his old second in command, George Falk, who'd had that sandwich idea, but he was wishing that he'd he'd had his name put on it because he wasn't memorialized quite like Rice was. Um, he was, during the war, really responsible for the tunneling units in World War One. So the tunneling units would dig underneath the German lines and then put a lot of explosive in and then blow it up. These operations, it was really fascinating. You ever read about the tunnel rats in World War One? We were doing it, the Germans were doing it, and there's actually warfare being conducted underground. I mean, these guys are also doing countermine operations underground. It's a really, really fascinating story if you ever read about the tunnel rats, and they had to be quiet and dig and without being caught. And some of the craters are still there. Famous, I think, Lochanger crater on the World War I battlefield is enormous. Probably as round as the kind of bit of the building we're sitting in here. It's absolutely huge. And he was largely responsible for that. He was knighted and then died suddenly, unfortunately. Let's move on quickly. Is that my time ticking away? I can see on the, yeah, okay. So he was memorialized. This is the kind of Victory Arch in Brompton Barracks in Chatham. And as you can see, the blockhouses were memorialized. And the mobile one as well. He was also responsible. So it's kind of like a, Rice Pattern blockhouse meets Oxwagon kind of mobile defensive thingy. If it had guns on it and a motor, it would have been a tank. So some people argue it's kind of the first ox-driven tank kind of thing. But it's mobility. Well, it's movable. You could move it to places and set it up and use it. It wasn't quite mobile. You wouldn't fight from it with a, and oxes don't go very fast. All the best will in the world. So he is memorialized there. Also memorialized a piece of mess silver from one of the regiments who served out here. So what have we got left from 9,000 odd Rice Pattern blockhouses? This is one on a farm in the Free States. No loopholes, but it looks like a blockhouse. Somebody owns that. Another one, still stuck. Notice that's got some outside stuff on there as well. Some wooden stuff. This is one pristine. This one's pristine in the Crewe. When I went to Richmond, somebody said, "Oh, I've got one of these on the farm." He's at the wood store. Went out and had a look. You go inside that and you can see all the numbers on the joists and everything. It's absolutely pristine. It's like it's been lifted off the blockhouse line and just put down on a base on the farm. Absolutely brilliant. So there's plenty still out there. These are originals. So when I say originals, original blockhouse, original site. Barberton, Burkeville, that's in the SAP barracks there. So reasonably well protected, but deteriorating badly. What happened to the one at Pretoria? Destroyed. SANDF put a bulldozer through it. Can you believe it? It's a registered provincial heritage site. The estate manager even said, "Oh yeah, I watched them do it, but I couldn't do anything." Somebody was running a shebeen out of it. They got fed up with it, so they put a bulldozer through it. Unbelievable. There's no other one in the world like this. So when we talk about what's left of blockhouses, nearly every one, apart from the ones like at Barberton, is totally unique. Totally unique. There was no other Rice Pattern blockhouse, octagonal one like this, anywhere else on the planet, and it's gone. Okay. Had some replicas. You see those? I'm going to speed up a little bit because we're running out of time a little bit. Forysburg, Clarksdorp destroyed. One at Modder River destroyed. One outside Harrismith, that was at the Boer Commando. The commando barracks, it was used as a kind of guard post. One at Carnarvon is surviving, and one built by a farm in Frankfurt, also kind of just about surviving. There we go. These are also originals, but they're kind of the wrong spots. The Bloemfontein, the one at Zandvliet was on a wine farm. I hear that one's been removed as well. So I get intelligence reports from people. They go and tell me, and I kind of update the field guide. So when the next kind of version of the field guide comes out, it'll have all the updates on it. There was a pair at Modder River. We didn't know where those was, but I found those ones. I've got a cunning plan maybe to recover these and relocate them somewhere. Needs to be put on somebody's property, convert them into maybe a little museum or display or something like that. The Polokwane pair, this was on a piece of land formerly owned by a stagecoach manager. The local up there, this gentleman, I think it was Johan, but I can't really remember, put a nice article in the local paper, thought he was doing a great thing, said, I'm going to get a protection order on these, and I'm going to save them. And the next day, the developers came and stuck the bulldozer through them and said, take that, matey. And they ended up as a pile of, just got rid of them. I don't know what happened to the bits or anything like that. So whenever I see one, I always say, I'm going to hire a trailer from Mr. Hire. I'll come and pick it up, and I'll just drive on the land and take it away. And I said that to SANDF as well. I said, that pile there, I'm going to come and take it because you ain't going to do anything with it. Oh, yeah, come onto our land. We're going to shoot you and everything like that. Well, we ended up getting the FAK involved, and at least the bits from the Pretoria blockhouse, most of the bits, we managed to recover, just about. But which is the greatest law to break? Putting the bulldozer through it, or me going onto the land in the middle of the night and taking the bits away and saving them somewhere? I'll let you answer that question. And that's the one at Mindfontein. For me, tourism or dark tourism and blockhouses, all heritage structures need a purpose. Pointless just having a pretty building there. It needs a purpose, needs to have a museum in it. You need to engage with the local community. You need to create jobs. Heritage needs to create jobs. And let's be clear, it needs to create black jobs for the local community. That's what it needs to do to survive. That's the only way to do it. That's the only engagement that's really going to do it. So there's a couple of examples. This one still exists. I'd love to buy that if I could, if my wife would let me. And then this one turned into a kind of stopover B&B Tommy style. You wouldn't want to take your wife to stay in that. I took my son, but it wasn't much fun, I have to say. Pretty dusty and everything. So when we look at the assets we sit on, I always say to South Africans, you guys here, you locals and everything, I'm a local too now, but you don't know what you're sitting on. Keep looking to Europe for guidance for what and everything. We've got everything here in South Africa, world class. We've got world class heritage sites. Look at all these sites here. Grahamstown Jail, repurposed as a coffee shop, sits on the campus. Battle of Isandlwana, Battle of Rorke's Drift. KZN have got it sorted with the battlefields. They've got a battlefields route. They know what they're doing. They're plugged into tourism. You go to a tourism show in Cape Town, that's what you're going to find. Battle of Magersfontein, also world-class site. It's pristine. It's like we walked off it yesterday, unbelievably. And then plug into everything else. Liberation struggle. Need to get that into the heritage agenda in the Leaf as well. You can tell all these stories and then add in a route. Got Frontier Wars, Zulu Wars, Anglo-Boer War, Liberation struggle, and then add in, what about the ancient sites? I was with a bunch of archaeologists at the weekend, dug out a beautiful Iron Age axe on a site that we'd found metal detecting for them. Then add in places like the cradle of humankind. You're telling a story 200,000 years, 200,000 years, especially in places like Machale's, where the cradle is and everything like that. Fantastic, world class. People pay money to come here and here in pounds and dollars. That kind of brings me to the end. It's been a bit quick at the end, but the story of blockhouses, of those little places, started just up the road by Major Rise. And I hope I've just illustrated today how innovation in a military sense can lead to blockhouses, but how innovation in a heritage sense can also lead to jobs and tourism. And that's what kind of I've seen today with also a bit pointless just having blue plaques on buildings. You've got to link them into a route, a walking route, have a guide, put them on websites, get them on technology. Because if we don't plug into all those things, then it's kind of a bit of a waste of time. And I say that to the archaeologists. What good are we doing here? Oh yeah, we preserve these and we put them in a museum, in a box, in a back room. So it's not adding value to anybody's life, particularly, is it? You need to get them let somebody hold it in there. I could pass an axe around now, let you hold an Iron Age axe. Tell a story, and then we can have a beer and some nice food and a jolt afterwards. That's where we need to take heritage. So thank you very much for listening to me today.